Okay, it looks like the numbers have slowed down, so we'll go ahead and get started. So good evening, everyone. Welcome to our fourth monthly evening community meeting to discuss the fiscal year 2023-24 funding plan for clean transportation incentives. I'm Stephanie Parent, the lead staff person for this year's funding plan. I'm also joined today by our amazing funding plan team. And many of you may be used to having my co-lead, Diane Sanchez, facilitate these evening meetings. And in case you haven't heard the news, Diane earned a well-deserved promotion to be a manager in our Office of Community Air Protection. So here are a few details before we get started with the meeting. The meeting is being recorded and it will be available on our meetings and workshops webpage in about 2 weeks, along with the attendee list. And we will drop a link in the chat for you of where that information is located. All meeting materials like the agenda and slides can be found on that webpage as well. And the link should be in the chat at this point. To ask a question or make a comment this evening, please use Zoom's raised hand feature. And if there are any disruptions or misuse of Zoom, we will reschedule and notify you. For security, we need your name visible in Zoom. If you called in, we'll identify you by the last 4 digits of your phone number when you raise your hand. Next slide, please. Oh, there we go. I was wondering if it was a delay on my end. So for today's meeting, we have a few important agreements for CARB staff and attendees to follow, which you can see here on the slide. The first one is to be respectful. Let's be kind and create a comfortable space for everyone to share their thoughts and experiences. Number 2, to take space and or make space. If you're usually quiet, challenge yourself to contribute more. If you talk a lot, leave room for others to participate. Number 3, listen to understand. Listen without judgment or jumping to conclusions. Number 4, consider equity. We aim to develop solutions with fairness and equal treatment in mind. Recognize that not everyone starts from the same place, and some face unique advantages or barriers. People from all over California are here to work together on the Clean Transportation Incentives Funding Plan. Each community has its own unique challenges and advantages, making diverse perspectives crucial. Our focus is to overcome barriers as we transition to cleaner transportation and mobility options. With these agreements in mind, let's continue with our meeting. So you'll see here today's agenda. So let's go ahead and discuss that. We have our introduction from now until about 5:10. Then we'll have about 30 minutes to discuss clean transportation equity and light duty vehicle investment updates. We'll take a 5-minute break partway through our meeting. Then we'll spend about 50 minutes discussing an overview of the draft funding plan workshop that staff held on August 31st. We'll have about 20 minutes to hear about our Clean Truck Check program, which is not part of the funding plan specifically, but we thought it was important to share with you this evening. And lastly, we'll have about 5 minutes to wrap up our meeting. For those of you new here or in need of a quick reminder, let's discuss our evening community meetings and their purpose. Typically, our annual funding plan development process involves daytime public workshops and work group meetings on various incentive projects. However, we understand that community members face unique challenges attending these meetings compared to industry, government, or non-governmental organization representatives. So this year, CARB is hosting monthly evening community meetings to make it easier for community members to engage with us. These meetings cover the same topics as our daytime workshops. Our goals for these community meetings are to provide a space for community voices and priorities, like key funding plan. Oh, excuse me. Okay. Highlight key. Hopefully you're able to hear me okay. I just received a message that my internet connection may not be stable. And so if that continues, I'm sure someone on my team will let me know, and I could always turn off my camera and maybe that will help. So we're gonna brainstorm solutions for clean transportation needs, highlight key funding plan information, and foster ongoing communication between staff and the community. While our daytime workshops have concluded for this funding plan phase, you can find previous meeting details on our website, which staff shared the link to in the chat. If you have specific questions about those, we're happy to delve into the slides further. Next slide, please. The funding plan team wants to ensure that we provide community members with a wide variety of ways to collaborate with us. One way to collaborate with us is to participate in these evening community meetings. However, we understand if you do not feel comfortable speaking in these forums. We have an open door policy and are currently scheduling meetings with community members or community groups who would like to meet one-on-one. Currently, our draft funding plan is posted on our website for public review and comment. The link that we dropped in the chat earlier has a link to the draft funding plan. Earlier in the funding plan development process, we created a community survey, and staff is analyzing the results of the surveys we have received for inclusion in the proposed funding plan. Now, we'll open it up for any questions before we dive into our first topic.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Matt Williams, and I'll be facilitating questions and comments today. If you would like to make a comment or ask a question, please use the webinar feature to raise your hand. For those using Zoom online, please click on the raise hand option on the Zoom navigation bar under the Participants tab. For those using Zoom on a mobile application, please click on the raise hand option in the More tab. For those who are participating by phone, please be sure to press #2 and we will call on you by the last 4 digits of your phone number. Once your line is open, you can begin to speak. Please state your name and affiliation first before providing your comment or question. We'll begin with Joelle Tony. Joelle, your line is now unmuted. Please state your name and affiliation before beginning your question or comment.
Hello, my name is Joelle Tony, and I'm a community member.
Great, thanks, Joelle. And what is your question or comment?
Okay, yeah, my question is what with this clean transportation budget and things like that, you mentioned that there is like a survey open. Is it still open or is it closed?
I can take that. Thanks, Joelle, for your question. Yes, Ava, if you want to go back to the previous slide, we do have the QR code is there on the slide. So if you have access to the presentation from our website, if you grabbed that, you can always scan that QR code if you have a cell phone that has a camera on it. And then I believe we also have a link to that survey on our website as well. And so, yes, you can still, even though we've been analyzing survey results to include in the funding plan, you can still respond to the survey. So hopefully that answered your question.
I'm not seeing any further questions or comments at this time, Stephanie.
Great, thanks, Matt. So Ava, if we could go forward 2 slides. Yes, thanks. And I need to change my slide also. I guess I should just mention that. Now I'm going to hand it off to my colleague, Graciela Garcia, for the next segment.
Thank you, Stephanie. So good evening, everyone. My name is Graciela Garcia, and I'm the policy lead over the light duty vehicle purchase incentives. So today I'm going to cover some topics that were discussed in our last public work group meeting that was held on August 23rd. And the first up is vehicle eligibility. So the Clean Vehicle Rebate Project, or CVRP, as our flagship vehicle purchase incentive program, has maintained a list of eligible vehicles for the program on its website based on the program's eligibility requirements. Over the years, a number of the other programs have referenced this list for eligible new vehicles for their programs. And this list includes new battery electric, plug-in hybrid electric, and fuel cell electric vehicles, as well as zero-emission motorcycles. So in order for vehicles to be added to this list, auto manufacturers are required to apply to CARB to have their vehicles reviewed, approved, and added to CVRP's list of eligible vehicles. Manufacturers must go through this process for each new model year, as there are times when vehicle specifications may change or program requirements may change. So the criteria that vehicles must meet to be included on CVRP's list of eligible vehicles has been workshopped with stakeholders and approved by the board through the annual funding plan process for the clean transportation incentives. Next slide. Thank you, Ava. So for fiscal year 2023-24, or the current year that we're in, staff is proposing to maintain vehicle eligibility currently in place, and staff will revisit these criteria and update them as needed through future funding plans. So with CVRP closing in the next month or so, staff also proposes to migrate the list of eligible vehicles from the CVRP website to the CARB website by late 2023 in order to maintain this resource. So CARB's vehicle purchase incentive programs, such as the financing assistance and Clean Cars for All programs, could continue to reference this list for eligible new vehicles for their programs, but would also have the flexibility to set stricter requirements for each individual program as needed. And up next, we have funding for adaptive technology. So language that was included in last year's budget, or the Budget Act of 2022, it provided direction for the California Air Resources Board to consider increased incentives to accommodate increased costs associated with adaptive equipment for eligible Californians with physical disabilities. And as a result, staff is considering these increased incentives for the Clean Cars for All program and financing assistance program. These additional incentives would reduce barriers to the program by lowering the financial burden for participants who require this equipment in order to operate a vehicle. Adaptive equipment ranges from relatively inexpensive items such as pedal extenders and steering knobs to much more expensive installations such as vehicle lifts and ramps that may cost tens of thousands of dollars. So staff will continue to research adaptive equipment and incorporate stakeholder and community feedback to determine how to best implement this change, as well as the appropriate funding amounts. As staff continue to analyze this potential program change, we'd like to take this opportunity to gather initial thoughts, concerns, or questions regarding adding adaptive equipment to the Clean Cars for All and financing assistance program. Next, we'll provide an update on the Assembly Bill 630 report for the Clean Cars for All program. So also known as the Evaluation and Goal Setting Report, Assembly Bill 630 directs CARB to set specific measurable goals and to establish metrics for the Clean Cars for All program. This report will help inform the long-term direction of Clean Cars for All and supplement other long-term plans, such as the long-term plan for light-duty EV market and other vehicle purchase incentive plans. CARB seeks to incorporate stakeholder and community inputs in determining the metrics that should be used and incorporated into this report. CARB has met with the various air districts to collect and begin compiling quantitative data from surveys, outreach efforts, and to include input from community-based organizations. Last year, CARB introduced new surveys with a focus on demographic data. These surveys have been released and CARB is currently pending analyzing this data. Additionally, under the direction of Senate Bill 1382, CARB will be conducting an assessment in the identification of underserved populations, barriers preventing these populations from program participation, and to propose strategies that would overcome those barriers. CARB is proposing using CalEnviroScreen 4.0 to establish a baseline analysis. In using CalEnviroScreen, factors such as feeling alone because of language differences, also known as linguistic isolation, cultural background and heritage, or ethnicity, and poverty assessment will be used in providing a thorough and complete overview to identify priority populations and begin to identify potential strategies to overcome barriers to participating in the program. In conjunction with this proposed analysis, survey results, and data from the air districts, CARB can have a holistic view on how to best continue supporting communities most in need. In previous work groups, stakeholders have requested a status update on district and statewide Clean Cars for All funding allocations. This slide above shows the cumulative funding as well as funds remaining for all administering air districts and statewide Clean Cars for All. We'll give folks a few moments to read the table. And with that, I will give an update on the Universal Dashboard. So the Universal Dashboard that's currently under development serves as an interactive tool that centralizes data from our electric vehicle incentive programs, which include Clean Cars for All, the Clean Vehicle Rebate Project, the Financing Assistance Programs, and the Clean Fuel Reward. The Universal Dashboard work is also being closely coordinated with our effort to create a universal survey that can be used across all the vehicle purchase incentive programs. This will allow the Universal Dashboard to unify the data being collected across all programs and help with monitoring and comparing quantitative and qualitative program data. The dashboard will use data visualizations and equity best practices to make complex information easy to comprehend for users. We're working with the Center for Sustainable Energy to develop the initial version of the dashboard that includes interactive features for users to customize their view of our program's data. The Center for Sustainable Energy has been working closely with program staff, program administrators, and key stakeholders to ensure that the product being designed meets the needs of various users. We expect to launch the first edition of the dashboard in late 2023 and continue to refine it well into 2024. At the August 23rd work group on clean transportation equity and light-duty vehicle investments, the Center for Sustainable Energy provided a brief presentation on a draft version of the dashboard. We have provided a link in this slide to their presentation if you are interested in learning more about this effort. Staff will also drop a link into the chat. Staff will continue looking for feedback on the dashboard through the development phase and once the dashboard is launched. So from there, we will now transition to our last topic, the sustainable community-based transportation equity projects. For fiscal year 2023-24, we have two main objectives for planning and capacity building. Two main objectives for these programs. The first is to streamline access to funds. This may include continuing a two-phased application approach to make it easier for communities to submit an initial application, but depends greatly on whether communities like this approach based on our current requests for applications for planning clean mobility in schools and the Sustainable Transportation Equity Project, as well as Window 2 for the Clean Mobility Options Project vouchers. To truly streamline access to the funds, we propose to combine the application, timeline, and grant process for all 4 project categories, including the 4 efforts, while preserving the goals and priorities of each. CARB would oversee the development of the request for applications and select the projects. The second objective is to streamline the administration of project funding. Currently, CARB is soliciting for a statewide planning administrator, which CARB proposes to supplement and continue using for planning and capacity building projects selected with the fiscal year 2023-24 funds. CARB would also solicit for a new mobility administrator to help manage the CARB selected clean mobility options, clean mobility in schools, and the sustainable transportation equity projects. The administrators would work in coordination with CARB, but be responsible for administering the projects while also providing capacity building and project implementation support, including but not limited to assistance with collecting and analyzing data and facilitating peer-to-peer learning. The budget includes $60 million for planning and mobility subprograms. With this, we're suggesting that $10 million go to planning efforts and that $50 million get evenly split between the mobility subprograms. And with that, we would like to open it back up for any questions.
Thank you for that presentation. Once again, if you do have a question or comment, please click on the raised hand feature in your Zoom browser. And if you're on the phone, press #2 to raise your hand, and we'll call on you by the last 4 digits of your phone number. We'll start with Joelle Tony. Joelle, your line is now unmuted. Please state your name and affiliation before beginning your question or comment.
Hi, it's me again. I was wondering, you mentioned earlier about using quantitative data, and I was wondering if you're using any of the data that was collected through AB 617, like some of the data that was collected through the regional and local monitoring. And then what is that data going to be used to, like, you mentioned like finding areas where people are more, I guess, isolated, but like, how are you going to like quantify any success with these programs? So 1, are you using hyperlocal data that communities have collected? And then 2, how are you going to create like solutions through this data? I think I asked that question clearly.
Hi, Joelle. Those are great questions. Do we have somebody from the Clean Cars for All team on?
I can go ahead and take that question. Thank you, Joelle, for that. So those are great insights, and we will be taking that back as well. So as always, I want to reiterate that we do practice an open door policy here at CARB. So if there is any data that you would like for us to include in our reports and in our assessment in data and policy, you could go ahead and send that email over. I believe, Stephanie, do you happen to have the Clean Transportation Inbox email? If you could go ahead and share that into the group, into the chat, I can go ahead and take those information that you shared, and then we can go ahead and take a look at it.
I can drop that email in the chat, or we can have someone do that. And I think I appreciate that. Oh, I should turn on my camera. I apologize. Tiffany, I appreciate what you shared about the data. And I think as far as the AB 617 data and thinking about the Clean Cars for All program, I don't know that we're directly using the AB 617 data, but if I'm wrong on that, I'm sure someone will jump in and correct me. I think one thing that we're doing is identifying lower income and disadvantaged communities through the Cal EnviroScreen 4.0 and figuring out, where the projects such as Clean Cars for All can be funded. And and beyond that, yes, we can definitely have you send us an email and we can always respond if there's more questions beyond that.
I don't see any further raised hands at this time.
Thanks, Matt. I appreciate that. Just a reminder that we do have up until like 5:38 to take any questions if anybody does have one, or if you think of one later, we'll have some more time for questions later on in the work group meeting this evening. Okay, so not seeing that there are any more hands, we could then go on to our next slide. And we're actually at the time for a 5-minute break. So let's go ahead and give everyone that just in case you need to stretch your legs or use the restroom or anything. And well, I guess instead of being back at 5:45, we could come back earlier, of course. And I do see that there is a raised hand. And since my camera and my mic are already on, I can go ahead and take care of that unless you want to, Matt.
I'm happy to do it. Our next question comes from Erica Romero. Erica, your mic is unmuted. Please state your name and affiliation before beginning your question or comment.
Hi, Erica Romero, just a private citizen. Quick question. Do you all have, I don't think I found this meeting on your CARB calendar. Could you drop in the chat where I could find agendas and materials for this meeting?
Yes, we can definitely do that. It's probably accessible through the link that we had dropped in previously. But yes, I recognize that sometimes things are hard to find on our website. So we can definitely find that specific workshops and meetings webpage that we have.
Our next question comes from Paul Haugen. Paul, your mic is unmuted. Please state your name and affiliation.
Hi, thank you. My name is Paul, and I'm just representing myself. I just want to echo what the previous person requested. It seems like I see the webinars on the calendar at one point, and then when I go back, they're not there, and I don't get the invites. So in the process, I've had to kind of bug people to send them to me according to the last minute. So I just want to echo that. If there's a better way for me to get the invites for the meetings. Thank you.
Thanks, Paul, for letting us know that. And I think it was Erica Romero as well. So I apologize for anybody that is experiencing those kinds of difficulties. And we do have a listserv, and it looks like that was dropped into the chat. And so, yeah, signing up for a listserv, that's always the best way. And then I would also say making sure to check your junk mail folder to make sure that maybe the emails hopefully are not going into your junk mail folder. And I think that's it for now on that question. And then, Paul, I see that your hand is still up, but I'm assuming that it's left up from earlier. Or did you have another question?
No, that was it. Thank you.
I don't see any additional raised hands at this time.
Thanks, Matt. Okay, so we'll go ahead and take a 5-minute break. And so instead of coming back at 5:45, if everyone could be back at 5:35, that would be great. Welcome back, everyone. So now we will provide a high-level overview of the funding plan workshop that was held on August 31st. And I'll hand it off to Grace.
Thank you, Stephanie. Hello, everyone. Again, my name is Graciela Garcia, and I'll be covering staff's proposed allocations for our clean transportation, equity, and light-duty vehicle investments. And I'll also provide a summary of staff's key proposals. So this year's budget carved out 80 million total for vehicle purchase incentives, including the Clean Cars for All program and other equity programs established by Senate Bill 1275. As you can see on the slide, staff is proposing 28 million each for Clean Cars for All and financing assistance, 18 million for the California e-bike project, 5 million for the Access Clean California, and 1 million for the California Integrated Travel Project. It is important to note that while the total appropriation of 80 million cannot be changed, we are seeking feedback on the proposed amounts between each project. So as previously mentioned, staff is recommending that 28 million be allocated to the Clean Cars for All program. Combined with last year's allocation of 125 million, these funds will provide sufficient funding for the statewide program for the foreseeable future. District programs also have an estimated 132 million left to spend from previous year's allocations, and historically the district programs have spent a maximum of 37 million during a 12-month period. So with this recommended funding allocations for the program as a whole, paired with what is still in the pipeline, we do believe this will allow the air districts to operate for multiple years. With all of that said, staff is looking for feedback on how the 28 million is divided between the statewide and air district programs. So for our mobility projects, there is a total of 60 million allocated for planning and mobility efforts. We didn't receive any feedback from stakeholders about the ranges that we originally proposed. So we are proposing 10 million for planning. We expect most projects to be about 200,000, but some may go up to 500,000. So the range would likely be between 25 and 37 community-led projects. Also, a percentage of the 10 million would go to the planning administrator. The remaining 50 million would be allocated to mobility. Of this amount, we propose an even split between clean mobility options, clean mobility in schools, and the Sustainable Transportation Equity Project. A portion of these funds would also go to the mobility administrator. This amount is not yet determined, but it is dependent on the specific administrator tasks, which will likely differ from past administrators. In November, we will take the proposed category funding splits to the board. And after the funding plan is approved, we will then hold implementation work groups in the winter and spring 23-24 to figure out additional details, including the funding amount that will go towards community-based projects and to the mobility administrator, as well as project selection particulars. What staff is interested in is any feedback from you on what the best ways to streamline access to funds. We will hold a Q&A session following this portion of the presentation, but some questions for folks to think about in the meantime are, What do you think of the two-phased approach and combining the application processes? Also, what do you think of the funding splits between the categories and within the mobility category? So with that, up next, I'll just cover a quick summary of some of the key proposals outlined in the draft funding plan. So some of the key proposals for this year that staff are considering include providing funding for adaptive equipment to reduce barriers for drivers with disabilities, as mentioned previously, and considering eligibility for zero-emission motorcycles for the Clean Cars for All and Financing Assistance Program as the Clean Vehicle Rebate Project phases out. We are still seeking feedback on appropriate funding amounts for adaptive technology retrofits and zero-emission motorcycles. In addition, and as mentioned earlier in this presentation, staff is also considering process changes to streamline CARB's sustainable community-based transportation equity projects. So this concludes the light duty and mobility portion of the draft funding plan overview. I'd now like to introduce my colleague, April Schmitz, to discuss our on-road heavy duty and off-road equipment investments. April?
Thanks, Grace. Hi, my name is April, and I'm the staff leading the development of the on-road heavy-duty vehicle and off-road equipment investment chapter in this year's funding plan, providing draft allocation amounts and key recommendations. Today, we will chat about proposed allocations and program-specific recommendations that we will be covering in this year's funding plan. On your screen, you can see the proposed budget allocations for the 23-24 fiscal year. The drayage and school bus amounts cannot change since those were specified by the legislature. However, the amounts proposed to the innovative small e-fleet or ISEF and core programs can change, and staff is seeking feedback on these draft allocations. In the fiscal year 23-24 budget, the legislature appropriated $80 million exclusively for zero-emission drayage trucks to be funded through HVIP. Over $500 million remain available in standard HVIP and set-asides for other vehicle or fleet types. Also this year, the legislature approved $375 million of funding for zero-emission school buses and supporting infrastructure. It's important to note that this is part of the $1.125 billion school bus funding that was included in last year's budget and approved in last year's funding plan. As part of the legislature's prudent fiscal approach on the 2023 budget, the $1.125 billion appropriation was reduced to $375 million. However, the legislature indicated they intend to keep the original $1.125 billion program whole by appropriating $370 million to CARB in the next 2 fiscal years. Next slide, please. CARB continues to build on efforts to ensure investments are distributed fairly and equally, strategically focusing funds to priority communities and reducing barriers for small fleets. In addition to recommending how our budget should be allocated, staff also make recommendations for program adaptations to ensure the most effective implementation of funds. Across the board, our heavy-duty voucher incentive programs continue to recommend enhancement to ease access and eligibility for small fleets. As HVIP enters its 13th year, the project continues to adapt to changing needs. This year, the project strengthens its focus on supporting underserved fleets and priority vehicle types. For HVIP, staff is recommending delaying the implementation of fleet size limits given the expected demand ahead of advanced clean fleets regulatory requirements while simultaneously enhancing support for small fleets through the ISEF program. We are also proposing changes to encourage timely vehicle delivery, co-funding with community mobility projects, and other policies to support priority fleets. As you may know, the innovative small e-fleet pilot is designed to help small businesses access zero-emission trucks and is funded as a set-aside within HVIP. Currently, the program doubles the base voucher amount for fleets with fewer than 20 vehicles and less than $50 million in annual revenue. The program has 2 tracks, one for standard vehicle purchases and a second track for leasing and rental opportunities, as well as new innovative solutions like trucking as a service. The main change that staff is proposing to ISEF is to fund all standard small fleet purchases through ordinary HVIP incentive process while maintaining an enhanced voucher amount. ISEF will then focus on the innovative solution projects for small fleets. To do this, staff proposed to align the HVIP small fleet definition with ISEF and continue to include eligibility for voucher stacking and the disadvantaged community modifier. We are also proposing to expand vehicle eligibility to include certain buses that transport people that are commonly used by small businesses, such as daycares and retirement homes. And lastly, for the core program, staff is proposing to focus the 2024 funding on small businesses as well. Proposed changes to core include updates to voucher pricing, the equipment eligibility process, and removing high dollar equipment from the equipment catalog. I believe I'll pass it over to Matt for questions.
Great. Thank you very much, April. Once again, if you do have a question or comment, please use the raise hand feature in Zoom, or if you're on the phone, press #2 and we'll call on you by the last 4 digits of your phone number. And as a reminder, we will ask that you state your name and affiliation before beginning your comment or question. Our first question comes from Robert Rosenbaum. Robert, your line is now unmuted. Please state your name and affiliation before beginning your question or comment.
Thank you very much. I'm with Climate Health Now. We're a group of healthcare professionals concerned about the health effects of climate. And in meeting with the CARB team, first of all, we want to thank you for your work and for the efforts that you're doing. A couple of fairly specific comments. We would like to see a little bit more assigned to the e-bikes program. From a health perspective, you can't do better than bicycles, and anything we can do to leverage people's involvement with e-bikes and bicycles is going to be really good from a public health perspective. We also applaud and would strongly emphasize that the small fleets innovative program leverage the disadvantaged communities. I'm not sure exactly what the mechanism could be. I heard you talk about there was some way of including that, and I'd be interested to hear how that's targeted a little bit more. One thing we've become aware of is that the Clean Cars for All programs, they're very scattered by multiple agencies across the state. And so it's often really hard for people to take advantage of this, and you have to be fairly sophisticated to pursue it. And so we strongly support a centralization of that and a rationalization of the program so that there's less red tape. A final comment, and here I'm speaking for myself rather than for Climate Health Now. I'm a neuropsychologist, and I've seen far too many people have head injuries from motorcycles. So if there's a place to take money from to fund more e-bikes, I would say take it from the motorcycles and give it to the e-bikes. That concludes my comments, but I would be interested in how the disadvantaged communities will be given access to the small fleets program.
Thanks, Robert, for your questions. I was trying to write some notes as you were talking so I could kind of keep track of the topics and the questions that you have. I know that not all of our staff are able to always make these evening community meetings. And so I believe that Olivia, who handles the ISEF program, is not on today. I don't know if there's anybody else on that would be able to talk about the ISEF program. And if not, I did drop the general email address into the chat. So anyone can always feel free to email questions to that address if we're not able to address it during one of these meetings. I see that Matt has turned on his camera.
Sure, I'm happy to address the question about how we target our incentives to priority populations. For our large statewide available purchase incentives like HVIP, ISEF, and CORE, the primary mechanism by which we ensure that the benefits of the program are primarily going to disadvantaged communities is to offer higher voucher amounts. The way that works mechanistically is within HVIP and similar programs, we have a voucher enhancement. So if a vehicle is requested to be domiciled in a disadvantaged community as identified in Cal Enviro screen, then that vehicle will get an additional voucher enhancement, which results in a higher incentive amount for the incentivized vehicle.
Thanks, Matt. And then Robert, I also heard a comment about clean cars for all. And so Tiffany, I don't know if you have anything that you would like to just generally share about the new, like, I don't know, phase of our Clean Cars for All program.
I can take that one, Stephanie. Yeah, so with respect to the Clean Cars for All program, I think currently it is implemented within regionally with the different air districts. However, we are embarking on a new effort to implement a joint program that includes the statewide Clean Cars for All and financing assistance program. So efforts are already underway to kind of consolidate and align requirements, not just within the Clean Cars for All program, but across our other purchase incentive programs like the financing assistance program.
Thanks, Grace. And then I believe the last thing that I heard was in regard to zero emission motorcycles, as far as like head injuries. And at least for me, that's not something that I was really aware of. And I don't know if we have someone on here now that could really speak to that, but I guess I would just generally say that we hear the comment and we can take that into consideration. And I see that Lisa has turned on her camera.
Yeah, I just wanted to acknowledge his comment around considering the funding for e-bikes and ensuring that we have more money for e-bikes. And this year we are proposing additional funding for e-bikes. Absolutely agree with you there. We do see that as a really great solution to complement these other projects. And we will, like Stephanie said, take your feedback with regard to kind of how we look at the motorcycles and the bikes. We'll take that back and continue to think about it. So thank you.
Thank you very much.
Our next question comes from Paul Haugen. Paul, please unmute your mic and state your name and affiliation.
Thank you again. This is Paul representing myself. My first question is about stacking with the new recommendations and the reorganizing of the different programs. And it seems like Clean Cars for All is kind of the centerpiece within that. Will stacking be available, since it seems like there's going to be fewer other programs to stack with? That's my impression anyway.
Hi, Paul. Thanks for your question. Yeah, so the stacking opportunities, I guess, will be limited now that CVRP is going away. However, if a consumer has a vehicle to scrap, there are stacking possibilities within the Clean Cars for All program and the financing assistance. So that will still be an opportunity. There are some nuances within there, but yes, it will still be allowed.
Is that specific information available?
We are working on having a graphic available that kind of describes the different stacking scenarios between the two purchase incentive programs. And so we're hoping to have that available up on our website, hopefully soon.
Okay. So it seems like, correct me if I'm wrong, my assumption would be that in the future, individuals for small vehicles would be able to get less assistance for these reasons. Am I correct on that?
So what do you mean by small vehicles?
I mean, light vehicles, I'm sorry.
The light duty vehicles?
Clean electric cars, basically. Individuals buying electric cars.
With the clean vehicle rebate project going away, there will be less funding available. Yes.
Okay. All right.
I would like to chime in here, Paul. With regards to the first part of your question, the financing assistance and CC4A each provide the grants as the down payment. These components of the programs are not stackable, but someone who has a vehicle to scrap and would like to sign up for the participation in CC4A or statewide CC4A program, they can benefit from the guaranteed low interest rates that we provide through financing assistance for financing the vehicles. And with regards to the second part, what we are proposing this time around as CVRP is phasing out and that incentive for new car buyers are not available at the point of purchase or after the fact, we are increasing generally across the board for these two programs. We are increasing the incentive amounts for financing assistance from $5,000 to $7,500, and that's at the point of purchase for both new and used vehicles. So we are changing our program parameters just to make sure that the very low-income consumers are well equipped with the right incentive amounts while they're going out for shopping clean vehicles.
Okay, and then you mentioned low interest loans. Is that still considered to be around 8%?
Yes, it is capped at 8%, and we are diversifying our the portfolio of our participating financial institutions, so there would be more players and more options for consumers.
Okay, and is that information available in print, or is that still being formulated also? All of what you just said?
They are throughout these are some of the proposals through last funding plan, and we are implementing these changes into the current program criteria, and the grant is under the development. We are going, once we sign the grant agreement, we are going to hold some public process like work group meetings to present all those kind of details to the stakeholders.
Okay, and if I can, I hope I'm not taking up too much time. When it's mentioned that people are in disadvantaged communities, that there's more funds available for people who live in disadvantaged communities or near them. Is there a definition for near? I mean, I'm literally a half a block away from the border, according to the map that you use to designate the areas. Is there a definition for what near means, or is it taken by case?
For financing assistance, we do not have a requirement for participants to reside within disadvantaged community, although applicants from this disadvantaged community and benefiting disadvantaged community areas determined by the CalEnviro screen, they are being given priority application processing. For the Clean Cars for All, I'll defer that to my colleague Tiffany or Anthony on the CC4A team.
Great, thank you, Ali. So in Clean Cars for All, we are governed by a half-mile radius as through AB 1550. So that is going to be kind of the boundary line in what is considered a disadvantaged community.
Okay, thank you. That answers my question. Thank you very much, all of you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Paul. Before we change topics, I just want to give everyone another chance to ask a question or comment on the annual funding plan. If you do have a question or comment, please use the raise hand feature in Zoom if you're online, or if you are on the phone, please press #2 to raise your hand and we'll call on you by the last 4 digits of your phone number. We'll just give it a minute. Stephanie, I don't see any further questions or comments.
Great, thanks, Matt. Thanks, everybody, for all of your good questions and feedback. So now I'll hand it over to my colleague, Duncan Fry, to provide a short presentation on CARB's Clean Truck Check program.
Hello, everyone. My name is Duncan Fry. I work for the Clean Truck Check Outreach Group at the California Resources Board. I just recently joined CARB, and before that, I spent about almost the last decade working as a maintenance coordinator, dealing with all of these new fleet and clean air rules while keeping a business humming. So I'm happy to be here this evening to lend any experience in navigating these new regs and incentives that anyone would like. And today we're going to take a very brief look over new regulations focusing on heavy-duty vehicles and equipment, and they're intended to improve air quality around the state. We're taking time in this meeting to give a quick overview and to inform community members like you of our latest efforts to clean up heavy-duty fleets and vehicles. CARB is dedicated to reducing harmful emissions and pollutants throughout all of California.
Duncan?
Yes?
I'm so sorry to interrupt. I believe your microphone is not down. There we go.
Thank you, Stephanie. So CARB is dedicated to reducing harmful emissions and pollutants throughout all of California, and we're working on this problem from several different perspectives. We're doing this through enhanced inspections and maintenance with the Clean Truck Check program, sales mandates across the automotive and transportation industries, zero-emission fleet phase-ins using the Advanced Clean Fleets and Transportation Refrigeration Unit programs, incentives and recognition programs helping Californians to purchase new vehicles or upgrade older ones. And finally, we're helping our state to adopt cleaner fuels and cleaner engines to help clean up the current generation of technology and provide a less costly option that can still have a long-lasting impact. The rest of my presentation is going to focus all on pillars 1 and 3. Next slide, please. The Advanced Clean Fleets program is a program designed to have a big impact on our state's air quality by providing a framework and incentives for large fleets to convert to zero emissions. Advanced Clean Fleets will require an accelerated transition for fleets in California that own or control 50 or more vehicles, have $50 million or more in annual revenue, all federal fleets, and dispatch companies. And these regulations affect vehicles with greater than 8,500 gross vehicle weight rating. It's basically anything larger than an F-250 Super Duty. This includes drayage trucks, which move cargo containers, off-road yard tractors, and some light-duty delivery vehicles. The goal of the amended Transport Refrigeration Unit, or TRU regulations, are to achieve additional emissions and health risk reductions from diesel-powered TRUs, as well as increase the use of zero-emission technology in the TRU sector. Transport refrigeration units contain a diesel engine and are used to control the environment of temperature-sensitive products like food, flowers, pharmaceuticals, and are often transported on trucks, trailers, rail cars, or in shipping containers. Transport refrigeration units visit various facility types and often congregate in pretty high numbers. And the type of facilities they visit include refrigerated warehouses and refrigerated distribution centers, grocery stores, truck stops, ports, intermodal rail yards, and other facilities where they run for extended periods of time to ensure that they remain cold or frozen. And switching to lower or zero emission units would go a long way to cleaning these up. Next slide, please. Clean Truck Check is a new program with requirements that are based on the heavy duty inspection and maintenance program regulations. And they had requirements that started in January of this year, starting with on-road testing. If an owner of a potential high emission vehicle is flagged and receives a notice to submit to testing, they have to submit a passing compliance test to CARB enforcement to stay compliant with the program. The older periodic smoke inspection program is still in effect, and vehicles subject to that regulation will still have to perform their annual opacity tests. And the periodic smoke inspection program will remain in effect until the Clean Truck Check periodic testing requirements take effect in 2024. And Clean Truck Check is intended to help ensure that heavy duty vehicles stay in good working condition, very much like the smog check program for passenger vehicles and light trucks. Next slide, please. The Clean Truck Check affects all non-gasoline fueled vehicles with a gross vehicle weight rating of over 14,000 pounds that operate in California. This includes heavy-duty trucks, tractor trailers, and buses operating in California, even if they're registered in another state or another country. This will level the playing field and make sure that a solution to a dirty truck or a dirty bus is not to register the vehicle in another state and keep driving in California. California registered motorhomes and agricultural vehicles are also subject to these regulations, and the Clean Truck Check will cover them in a slightly different way. The Clean Truck Check database to enter all of these vehicles into will open in October, and all affected vehicles and payments for annual compliance fees will need to be in by the end of this year. And then beginning in 2024, vehicles added or removed from the fleet must be reported within 30 days, and an annual compliance fees are due before each vehicle's first compliance test deadline, which will start July 1st, 2024. They're all based on the vehicle's registration deadlines, so they'll move around quite a bit, but none of them come into effect earlier than next July. Next slide, please. So Clean Truck Check is done by credentialed Clean Truck Check testers. And they're the only ones that can perform tests, with the exception of onboard diagnostic tests that can be submitted via a telematics service provider using a CARB certified OBD test device, and that would be an automatic submission. Anyone with the right tools can become a credentialed tester once they complete the short, free online training course and score a minimum 80% on the accompanying exam. And for trucks that are newer than 2013, the only equipment required to perform these tests is a CARB-approved OBD test device. And a list of testers who want to be listed publicly is available on the Clean Truck Check webpage. And if you'd like to learn more, please check out the websites listed on this page, and we'll throw some links in there to make sure that everybody can get to them. And please feel free to ask questions about anything from the presentation you would like more information on. We also have a much more in-depth look at the Clean Truck Check tomorrow from 10 to noon with a focus on public transit, but we'll cover the entire program. And registration is open to the public for free. You can find a registration link by using your favorite search engine to look for CARB Clean Truck webinar with tomorrow's date.
Great, thank you, Duncan. At this time, we will turn it back over for questions and comments. If you do have a question or comment, please raise your hand in Zoom, or if you've called in, press #2, and we'll call on you by the last 4 digits of your phone number. As a reminder, if you do have a question or comment, please start by stating your name and affiliation, and we'll wait for any raised hands to come in. I do not see any raised hands.
Thanks, Matt. So I want to thank Duncan for his presentation and also to thank everyone for their participation this evening. We're getting close to the end of our meeting. So I will just talk about the kind of reviewing the funding plan development schedule at this point. So we can go to the next slide. So thanks again for collaborating with us this evening. We're really appreciative of the time that you took out of your commitments to share comments, concerns, ask questions, and share your ideas to move us toward clean transportation and mobility options in your respective communities. As I mentioned earlier, we want to provide as many opportunities as we can for you to collaborate with us. You can, again, talk to us during these meetings. You can reach out to us to set up a one-on-one meeting with us as well. We had dropped the general email address into the chat earlier, and we'll have it on the next slide as well. Just a few quick reminders about upcoming meetings. So staff plan to post the proposed funding plan to CARB's website on October 6th for a 30-day public review and comment period. And when that 30-day time opens, that's a great time to send an email, send a letter with your comments and concerns and questions. We will hold one more evening community meeting on the third Tuesday of October, which is the 17th. And again, that'll be from 5 to 7 p.m., just like this evening. And that'll be to discuss the proposed funding plan and to hear your questions and comments about it. Staff will present the proposed plan to the CARB board on November 16th. Assuming that the proposed funding plan is approved by the board, staff will begin to implement projects or changes to projects beginning in December and continuing through to next year. And then on our next slide here. Thank you again for your time and collaboration this evening. And you can reach us at our team's email address, which is cleantransportationincentives@arb.ca.gov. And staff will drop that in the chat shortly. To keep your inboxes up to date on the funding plan process, please make sure to subscribe via our listserv. And the link for that will also be dropped in the chat by staff. And again, as a reminder to make sure that you check your junk email box to make sure that our listserv messages are not going there. So on behalf of the funding plan team, it was my pleasure to facilitate this discussion with you this evening. Please take good care of yourselves, and if you can, someone else too. Have a good night.